Today's episode is brought to you by Media for All, which was set up to help encourage more Black, Asian, and other ethnic talent into media, and to provide a support and mentoring network to ensure talent flourishes in the media industry that we all love. If you're looking for a mentor or would like to mentor young ethnic talent, check them out at mediaforall.org.uk, and it is all 100% free. Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week or so I have the pleasure and the privilege of interviewing one of our industry's leaders, and this week is no different. I'm on a call with Jim Cruickshank, who is VP Global Digital Development and Retail Technology at Pandora. Jim, for those of the audience who aren't familiar with what you do, can you give them an overview of your career to date and what you do day to day?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me here. So what do? I guess I've spent the last 20 years doing digital product development. So that really has meant either doing internet startups or working for big companies like Microsoft, and Marks and Spencer, and now Pandora, essentially managing, building and managing their digital experiences, whether that's their kind of websites or apps or kind of in-store technology, essentially trying to build great consumer experiences.
And what startups did you do?
So my first startup was a property website. Back in the first sort of dot-com bubble in '99. It was essentially a website that tried to match buyers and sellers directly, taking the estate agent out of the loop. So that was the first one. And the second one was a company called Style Pilot, which I set up to help us menfolk figure out style, figure out what to wear by building a sort of personalization sort of engine, enabling blokes to sort of input information about themselves in order to get recommendations on what brands, what clothes to wear.
And when was that?
When was that? That was probably about 8 years ago now.
Wow, sounds like a habit of being 5 or 10 years ahead of the market. Was that fair?
I think that's probably a fair conclusion about both of my startups. I think setting a property website up in '99 was a little ahead of the market. So yeah, I think I need to review my timing.
So in that very career, have you been a reader of marketing books? And if you are or have, did you have any you could recommend to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, marketing books very much focus on digital product development. So, which, is not a million miles away from sort of marketing theory, I guess. My sort of go-to book is a book called The Lean Product Playbook by a guy called Dan Olson. And it's good. I kind of recommend it to any sort of starting sort of product manager because it's really is a great sort of guide for how to go from targeting a specific customer through to figuring out and understanding kind of their needs, through to how to build a proposition, how to identify which features to build, and then how to kind of optimize it. And it is to say for any sort of aspiring product manager, it is a really good practical guide on how to sort of find that sort of product market fit really quickly, really effectively.
And so for those in the audience who don't know exactly what a product manager is, can you explain that role?
Yeah, a lot of people sort of get mixed up between a product manager and a project manager. The difference is that a product manager is actually accountable for the product that's being built. So the product manager is accountable for effectively deciding on the right product to build for a specific customer target group. And the product manager is not just focused on sort of a short-term thing. It's really product management is about kind of the end-to-end life cycle of a product, and going from build to kind of optimize and either kill or enhance or do something different. So it's very much product management was very much born on sort of the West Coast, Silicon Valley, very much a key role in sort of software development, and is a function that's sort of started now to build much more momentum in Europe. And so you now start to hear about roles like chief product officer sitting at the same level as a chief marketing officer. But it's essentially a slightly different discipline.
And so outside of following the good advice in that book, what are the mistakes that you've learned from in your career? What was that defining awful moment that was pretty horrible at the time, but you're glad it happened in the end?
Yeah, there are many to choose from, but I'll probably actually just refer back to my first startup, because I think I learned so much in that sort of experience where I sort of during a summer holiday and having tried to move house in Britain and had sort of a hideous nightmare, decided that I was going to solve the world in terms of property. I sort of wrote a quick business case and found an unsuspecting venture capitalist to give me some money, and went through this sort of 18-month experience of which I know can only be described as crazy, sort of moving at pace in terms of building a team to build a new property website as fast as possible, being pushed by the VC to do it sort of at lightning speed. And I guess the huge, enormous mistake there was that at no point in time, through the complete pressure from the venture capitalists, at no point in time did we speak to customers. So we, again, going back to the timing point, we're building this amazing sort of online property website where you can search for properties and sell your own property, not even considering the fact that it was still sort of dial-up modem sort of world at that point. And the experience was not, the essential experience was not fantastic at that point. And so we burnt through our cash pretty quickly. And albeit we were incredibly lucky, had an elegant exit, Norwich Union sort of acquired us and we could move it to the next point. But I guess the lesson for me was not building something that a customer essentially wants. So I think I've taken that learning through with me every sort of new instance of building something for a customer, getting the rawest form of that new experience in front of a customer in advance of committing to investing, building expensive things. So that's and of course that's sort of central to kind of agile ways of working, but it essentially sort of fueled a passion for me for kind of digital product development. That was the first big experience, and a pretty hectic one at that. But I've been in so many situations since in companies where people have been racing to build something or deliver something without having done enough work upfront to understand what customer and what need and how this was going to help solve their need.
How do you know when you've done enough consumer research?
Yeah, that is a good question, and of course, it kind of depends, which is the obvious answer. But for product development where it's in sort of a more familiar domain, there are similar products or experiences that already exist, so it's not too much of a big leap for a customer to get their heads around. Research to sort of help fine tune that can be, briefer, I guess. I guess the problem, the opposite, on the opposite end of the spectrum, where you're sort of in a space where you're trying to do product build, where it's sort of major sort of innovation, perhaps it doesn't exist. it's some people kind of go, well, we don't need to do any research because they don't know what they're talking about, and how would a customer know what they want, and etc., which is fine. Of course, it's difficult to get customers to come up with the answers themselves, but it's no excuse not to put your kind of initial sort of hypotheses, or paper prototypes or sketches in front of customers to get their reaction. So I mean, obviously there are many different types of research for different challenges, and it's finding the right flavor, I guess.
So what is that top marketing tip that you've come across in this product development career? Because I assume that your kind of role crosses over between sort of user experience and product experience with the way that product is talked about. What have been those lessons, or that's one specific bit of advice that's always stuck with you?
Well, actually, I started off working life working for a full service advertising agency called Legas Delaney a number of years ago, and I started off life as a media planner buyer. My boss at the time was a guy called Jerry Fielder, who was media director and chairman. So I was incredibly fortunate to, my very first job, suddenly be propelled into a role working for the chairman of an agency, which was amazing. And he kind of, without question, to this day, is the most inspirational boss I ever had. He taught me how to sort of think strategically, which a lot of people sort of step over quite quickly. And he just sort of gave me some, this is going to sound very simple, but just simple sort of structures, like the sort of 5 W's of kind of who, why, what, where, when. To this day, I still fall back on that as a structure, whether I'm sitting in a meeting and someone is sort of pitching a new idea. It's you start to sort of take a step back and sort of ask those kind of fairly fundamental questions. Who are you talking to, and why do they want it, and what are you building, and where are you going to do this, and when are you going to do it? It is just such a simple structure. When you're sort of putting, I often get people say, how do I write a strategy? How do I write a product strategy? And it's such a simple sort of structure just to follow. People, when writing sort of product strategies or similar things, overcomplicate so often, and therefore lose the audience. I often find, therefore, just keeping that sort of very simple structure and narrative, I think for me was one of the best sort of lessons that I've kept on using.
So your advice is to say who, what, when, where, why, and how to everything that you're working on. But what are the shortcomings of that? What does that miss? Is there a missing W or a missing other letter? When do you find that that's not enough, or is it always enough?
I think it's it's a very good backbone, and I guess again it depends on the sort of situation or the challenge or the project in terms of what the question, what's enough, what's missing. I worked at Microsoft for a number of years, and they sort of answered everything in immense detail. We used to write sort of 100-page kind of market requirements docs, and I guess for me, what I've learned over the years is to constantly ask, is that enough to enable us to get going? Because in many companies, I have kind of seen this sort of enormous paralysis of continuing to ask the same questions again and again and again, and wanting to go into ever more detail, an analysis before making decisions. And so really, it's It's about what's the minimum amount of information do we need to move to the next step, and move from sort of intention to action. The product development world I'm from is very much about, let's stop talking about it. Let's make something. Let's do it. Put it in front of the customers to understand if we're going in the right direction. Otherwise, we'll sit and theorize until the cows come home, and we won't get anywhere.
This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with Madfest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from Madfest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. So we're at the halfway stage now, and we're going to talk about your shiny new object, which is augmented reality in the retail space. So I would like to hear your 5 W's on that, if you don't mind using your own structure.
Yeah, well, you haven't prepped me for that one, so I'm going to make it up on the spot.
Let's start with what is it?
No, that's absolutely fine. So the reason why I picked augmented reality was because Pandora, obviously retail, is obviously an incredibly difficult time for retail with COVID, and as a business globally, we've got over 7,000 stores which have been sort of opening and closing over the last 12 months, and we've really been having to rethink the kind of role of digital and physical stores and how they sort of interact, and start to sort of play around with the role of each one and fuse them together. And so I will go back to your question, which starting with who, we suddenly clearly understood that we had a whole bunch of our customers who were really only used to shopping with us in our physical stores and were not used to shopping with us online. Suddenly, with our stores closed, they started moving online. But we recognized that their need was slightly different from our usual online customer, because a huge lack of sort of confidence in suddenly being forced into kind of online and e-com, and specifically with our customers. A lot of our customers go to stores to obviously see our jewelry, to pick it up, to kind of put it on and see what it looks like on themselves. And so we recognized this was something we weren't delivering online. And so we had to pretty rapidly last year figure out how we could bring the traditional kind of benefit of a physical store onto kind of our online experience. And so augmented reality was one of the solutions that we decided that we would want to sort of play around with. And so we developed this experience that essentially allows customers to use the camera of their mobile phone, and then superimpose our jewelry products, whether rings or bracelets or necklaces, superimpose our products on themselves, on their hand, on their wrist, to be able to see what our products look like on themselves. And it was definitely one of those things that I think if we sort of sat back and sort of theorized, I think I might have just sort of closed it down as a potentially gimmicky solution. But so we decided to experiment with it, just make it really quickly, offer it to a subset of our customers, and test it. And it's been sort of extraordinarily successful. I think where we sort of thought it might be a bit sort of gimmicky, it's actually proven to be a hugely powerful experience for customers. And we've been able to convert a lot of store customers into kind of multi-channel customers.
Can you tell me a bit more about that success? Is that success in basket size, or is it like anecdotal feedback, or just volume of customers? Obviously, without giving away any trade secrets, but just how do you know it's worked so well?
Yeah, we with stores closing, certainly Q4 last year, as for any retail business, is the crunch quarter. We estimated what our commercial gap might be. We were forecasting which stores were going to be closed during sort of October, November, December last year. So we had a commercial gap to fill, and we developed a whole plan to start to transition customers online and to get them to convert and buy online instead of going into our stores. We know that the good thing about digital is you can measure absolutely everything. So we can measure very clearly those people who use this augmented reality feature on our website converted. I think it was approximately three times wow. a typical customer. And this was one of a number of solutions we used to really close that sort of commercial gap. So it was successful from that point of view.
So we've done the what, we've done the who, we've done the why, we've done the where. It's on the website. What else is left to discuss in terms of what you've been doing in the last year or so?
Well, I think that what I really am enjoying at Pandora is bringing that startup sort of mentality to their sort of experience change. And it's also about, for me, it's using that sort of customer first approach. So, I think in sort of historically, Pandora might have reacted differently to the COVID crisis by kind of talking to, marketing separately, and then IT, and then retail, and then digital, giving that brief to different teams and seeing what they would do. Whereas the way that we dealt with this last year was that I set up effectively a startup team within Pandora. So pulled, a couple of people from IT, from digital, from marketing, from retail, all into one team, one cross-functional team. And we went from, defining customer problem statement to ideation, had 140 ideas through rapid sort of prototyping to get to kind of 11 solutions, which we then delivered across 9 markets. And we did all of this in 6 months, which, our CEO said that's more change in the last 6 months than I've seen in the last 5 years. So I think it's what's really, satisfying, I guess, is the ability to show in a corporate sort of environment the kind of benefits in working in that sort of agile startup way, but the criticality of keeping customers at the heart of that sort of new product development.
And so what surprised you most during this process?
Maybe not surprised, but I think just the fact that we were all doing this sort of working remotely was just an enormous challenge. Trying to dream up the whole process, deliver 11 new solutions, across many markets sort of globally when stores were closed, was just an enormous challenge. So, trying to find sort of, virtual tools to kind of replicate, what you would typically do in a sort of a workshop, plastering sort of ideas across a wall. Suddenly we had to come up with whole new ways of working to try and sort of replicate that typical kind of development process.
Are you able to talk about that specific ideation moment in any detail? Was there a specific technology you used that you felt solved that issue, or did you find yourselves brainstorming in a better way because you weren't together? Or how has that kind of worked for you in the last 12 months or so?
Yeah, we were sort of working remotely from all sorts of different countries. So, I think other people have found this tool pretty valuable as well. But we use Miro, which is just a really great kind of whiteboarding tool. And we now use it for many other things, doing team retros, brainstorming, road mapping, but it's just a really good tool to be able to, many people at once, to be able to sort of, put post-it notes up and sort of ideate. So I guess that was probably one tool that sort of stands out as something that sort of allowed us to get past the challenges of working remotely.
And do you think you've had a different sort of idea in that period, or do you think you would have come up with similar solutions had you been in the same room somehow?
It's difficult to say. I mean, I think what you lack is that sort of bouncing off each other, because even with great kind of remote sort of planning tools, you still miss that sort of close interaction, and someone has an idea and the other person builds on it and sort of expands it or moves it in a different direction. So there is still no question that sort of every successful startup on this planet pretty much has started off with a small number of people stuck in the same room together, sort of brainstorming and bouncing off each other. So we're trying to find ways to sort of replicate that without being in the same room, but there's still being in the same room is still the best for that sort of part of the stage.
So if someone's listening to this podcast and thinking, right, I need to set up my own cross-functional startup team in my business, what are the initial steps that you would suggest that they take to get that ball rolling?
Well, I mean, I've sort of dubbed it sort of the lighthouse approach in Pandora. So, effectively what we're doing is we're kind of identifying those really sort of heavy lifting problems, complex problems that traditionally have had sort of little traction because of the complexity. So, give you an example. So personalization is one of those sort of, really complicated spaces that touches potentially many different parts of the organization, lots of different technology systems, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very, very hard to nail it down and get traction because of all that complexity. So in Pandora, we're looking for domains like or problems like personalization that are super complicated, do require sort of lots of different people from around the organization to find success and build success, and then set up dedicated cross-functional teams to go after those big problems. And the very big difference, or one of the critical success factors, is that you give the team autonomy. So you give them a super clear kind of objective with outcomes that you are shooting for, but then you give them the autonomy to go and tackle it themselves. And also the critical thing is that team is utterly dedicated to that task, i.e., lots of previous situations where companies are saying, well, maybe we'll only get sort of 10% of Bob from IT, 10% of his time, and we'll get 20% of Shirley from marketing, and we'll make it work. It really doesn't. It is so important that these people are given the freedom to be dedicated to this sort of challenge to do it successfully.
So we have to wrap it up there, and we were introduced by the Future Conference. So can you just give us a very top-line overview of what you'll be talking about there? Really, we'll probably be talking in a bit more sort of detail about sort of the Pandora sort of journey as we, as an organization, have sort of digital transformation sort of at the heart of our strategy, and we've really been using sort of agile sort of ways of working to reorganize parts of the company, to set up different ways of working,
to essentially inject huge pace into the way that we move and change to consumers' ever-changing sort of expectations. So more detail on that journey.
So if you want to see Jim, he's going to be speaking at Future Europe Summit. That's FUTR.today, and that's on the 20th and 21st of May this year. So please go and check out Jim on stage virtually, I assume. But Jim, what an interview. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to you. I enjoyed it. Thanks.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That would just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.